Hello again, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Conversations in State. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, by now you're used to Conversations in State, and it is never too much of a reminder to remind you that Conversations in State more or less focuses on those departments or I should say agencies that fall and function within the ambit of the Ministry of the Presidency without necessarily being physically there. Today we will focus, for the first time on this program, we will focus on the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, and it is my pleasure to have on the program the Commissioner for the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, Mr. Trevor Benn. Commissioner Trevor Benn, welcome to Conversations in State.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Right, it is so great to have you. And again, viewers, the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, it functions within the ambit of the Ministry of the Presidency. And today you'll be hearing the purpose of it, why there is a Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, and some of the projects and so on that they would have been working in, including several outreaches that recently took place. So I invite you to stay tuned and be informed in the next 30 minutes or so. Commissioner Benn, let's start at the beginning. What is the purpose of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission?
First of all, Malika, I'd like to say that, well, thank you for having me.
Welcome.
The Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission works to support the development of lands across Guyana. You probably know that the president is the custodian of all lands. Public lands. In Guyana, more than 70% of all lands are public lands. And through His Excellency the President, the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission is tasked with administering the lands.
The lands, okay.
So we act as the custodian. We oversee the administration of the land, and we implement decisions of His Excellency in relation to the issuance of those lands and the development of those lands. The Lands and Surveys Commission also have the responsibility as being the repository for all information relating to lands. So, for example, anything to do with the plans that are drawn up in relation to those lands, the titles that are issued, they're stored at Lands and Surveys. We have information, registers that date back to the 1800s.
Wow.
Of persons who may have been issued lands over the period.
Do you, sorry to jump in here, but you said dating back to the 1800s, do you often get people inquiring about going as far back as that and even a little closer, coming more modern, into modern times?
Yes, Malika, that's a regular event. People come with documents sometimes we don't even have records of,
Wow.
but which we can authenticate, having looked at it. So we may not as a country have done as good as we could have done in terms of the storage of these records. But some families have managed to do a much better job, and so sometimes they turn up with copies of documents that we don't have in our repository and which we're happy to collect for the purpose of storage. But yes, we have a large amount of documentation nonetheless, dating back to the 1800s, and we can tell you the ownership of lands dating back to that period. We also have the responsibility for surveying of land in Guyana. Anyone who wishes to survey a plot of land is required to submit copies of that surveyed plot. Or to get permission to survey the lot from the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission. And once it is surveyed, they should submit a copy for our records and for posterity.
Okay.
We also have responsibility for global information systems in the case of Guyana. So we are supposed to be, again, the repository for GIS. And we play a more coordinating role among the agencies that are involved in that. So in a nutshell, those are the three main areas that we function in. but most people know us for the land.
The land, exactly, and that is what, and that
Yeah.
brings me to even before we talk about some of the things that I mentioned in the opening sentiments. Let's talk about leases, land for lease. What is the current situation as it relates to lands for lease?
Well, Malika, I inherited when I got to Lands and Surveyors 18 months ago, over 82,000 land applications waiting to be processed. There's a big demand for land, and that demand has been increasing recently for land. But we are trying our best to move the process as quickly as possible. My admonition to the staff is that an application should not take more than 3 months to be processed. But you will appreciate that we are still a paper-based organization. And so everything is done manually.
Wow.
All of our records are stored manually. We are working to change that at the moment. And so because we are humans and paper can get loose sometimes, records are not necessarily always readily available. And so sometimes that causes the process to be much longer than we had hoped. But we are currently working to bring about some changes to that. We are computerizing. My vision, my mission is to ensure that every staff member that have anything to do with our data must have a computer on his or her desk. And so we are working towards making sure that that is in place, and to ensure that we can be able to retrieve information more readily for the benefit of our clients.
Commissioner Ben, how old is the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission? Because I'm trying to figure out for how long they've been functioning as a paper-based organization.
Well, the GLSC came into being in 1990, in 2001, but
Okay.
prior they were organizations under different name
Okay.
that went all the way back to the early 40s and 50s that has been working, maybe even before that.
Okay.
But the commission itself came into being in 2001.
Okay.
And since then, I know several attempts have been made to computerize, but none so far has worked. We have an aggressive program at the moment trying to do that, and I hope that within the next year or so, we can make it fully computerized so that people can also apply online for the. At the moment, they have to personally come in and apply and to express an interest in a plot of land. So we're hoping to move the process to a point where people can do their application online. But there are a number of things that needs to happen, not only computerizing the office, but we have to be able to link the land with a parcel number to the system in the office. So when you say to the person, here's a plot of land that might be available to you, you can show them it on the computer.
So that is not happening at present.
We can't do that at present. Our parcels are not in the system as yet, as we are working on it. We have target region 4 as the first region for that, the most populated region, of course. And so we have begun work on that, but we are far from it, and it's a very costly and very tedious exercise. And so we're working on training staff while we are doing it little by little.
Okay. Let's talk about the impact of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, especially since you've been commissioner. Let's talk about impact. What sort of feedback are you getting if the impact is a positive one? I know you did mention some of the challenges that you face, but are you still able to function at a level that you would want to at this point in time?
Actually, I don't think we are functioning at the level I would like at the moment, and that's for a number of reasons, but I think we've come a far way. We have made a lot of major changes and improvements to the way we operate. One of the biggest challenges we face at the Commission is, of course, as we discussed earlier, documentation, finding documents for clients when they come, because we have to go through files manually. And we didn't necessarily capture those records in a particular way to help us to retrieve it easily.
Yes.
So we are putting systems in place to make sure that when people come at the beginning, we capture the information that is necessary, so that if they leave and they don't come back until 3 years after, we still have records of that conversation.
Okay.
And we are becoming a little bit more aggressive in terms of following up with the clients and so on, so that people are aware that we are working. By the way, everyone that comes through that door, they're required to pay a fee. And so if people are going to pay a fee, then they expect a certain level of service. And so the orientation of the staff now is that, you know, people expect that you give them the kind of service that they're paying for.
Because when people hear a fee, they get a bit confused and tight-tongued, in the same way I got a few seconds ago. When you say that everyone coming through the door is required to pay a fee, could you explain a little more? Does it depend on what business they're coming to conduct?
Definite. It depends on what you're coming to do. Well, I should state that differently.
Okay.
Not everyone coming through the door pays, but depending on the business that you're doing. There are fees for the application forms, for example. There are fees for inspection of the land that you have an interest in. If the staff has to leave the office to go with you to show you a part of land to see if you're really interested, there's a fee that has to be paid. Once that is done, then you pay for the application. And at various stages, there's a fee for you to pay. So we are saying to the staff that people who pay money expect to get a certain kinds of service. And so we're working to improve that interaction with the clients to make sure that their experience with lands and surveys is a positive one. That has not been the case over the years, and we've been having lots of complaints, which we're trying to work through at the moment. The commission requires, for it to function effectively, it has to be continuously capitalized and recapitalized. There's vehicles, there is total stations, the various equipment that is used in surveying. Not to get too technical, but there's one piece of equipment that we purchased for use in the field, which costs $3 million easily. And if that go out in the field, it falls while work is going on. It's done.
Okay. Without even putting too much in the public domain, because you know, viewers, these organizations still require a certain amount of privacy and so on, and you know, all of this is to protect operations and to protect workers in a sense. Are you in a position to say whether the GL&SC is financially challenged? Would you go as far as to say that they're financially challenged, and you know, if you see an improvement in terms of that very soon?
Well, I believe every government agency is financially challenged. We are not a rich country, and so our resources are very limited. We cannot do all the things that we would like to do, and Lands and Surveys is no exception. We have serious financial challenges. There are many things that we would like to invest in to make the visitor experience more positive, but we're not able to do it. This is largely due to the fact that we are a semi-autonomous agency. We are required to make our own, raise our own resources, and whatever we get from the government is not necessarily sufficient to do the varied tasks, to meet the various tasks that we have responsibility for. But like every other agency, yes, we do have financial challenge.
Okay. Yeah. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, of course, this is Conversations in State, and today we're talking with the Commissioner of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, the Commissioner Trevor Benn. Recently, you've had an outreach to Kokwani. Let's talk about that outreach and if other communities can see outreaches like this in the near future.
Okay. Yes, Malika, we just returned from Kokwani, and in fact, a team, in keeping with the commitment we give to the residents of Kokwani when we visited there 2 weeks ago, there's a technical team that is going into Kokwani tomorrow.
Okay.
to start the work we promised the residents of Kokwani. Kokwani is a very special community. It has been there for many, many years, and it was one of the better organized community over the years, but for some reason or the other, not much attention was paid to it over the in the recent past. And so we have lots of residents there living on lands for which they have no documentation.
How do you deal with that? I mean,
Yeah, and so we now have to go and do an inventory. We call it an occupational survey to see who's occupying, where they're occupying, and to try and to regularize the occupation. So there's a team of about 10 people that will be in Kokwani as of tomorrow for 3 weeks to help to do that. These exercises cost money again. Every time we have to send a team out to regularize a community, we have to go with the equipment to take the measurements to see where you occupy, the space you occupy, and on the basis of that to draw up a plan and then to encourage people to apply for the land. It's a long process.
so it's not a case where they would be displaced or anything like that?
No, that's not our role and our function. We try. We understand that many people have been challenged and they went to the lands because they had no other choice, no way of getting it otherwise. And so we're working with the people. We went there 2 weeks ago and we had meetings with them. And we got as much information as we could get from them in that one meeting. But now, based on that, the conversation we had with them and the staff is back there tomorrow to pick up from there and to try to make sure that we have as much information to help the people to become regularized and for them to get a title to the land.
Have you found that they've been receptive?
So far, yes. But Malika, this is not the only community. We have gone to Port Kaituma. We've gone to Madia. We've gone to Bartica. We are in Letem next week. And we have been to Blackbush Bola. Many of these places, there are people who have applied for many, many years. For example, in Port Kaituma, we saw people who applied in the late 80s, still waiting to be titled for their lands. In Mocha, we've been in Mocha, we've been to Rosanante. One of the challenges we have seen, we face is that some people believe that once you submit a request or an expression of interest to the commission, that forms the basis of an application. In the case of Mocha, one man, when we went there, he was complaining that the Lands and Surveys was not doing anything for him and that he had applied ever since, and he was holding a piece of paper in front of my face to show me, and it was the application he had in his hand. He never submitted it. So we can't help you if you don't follow the process. You have to make sure that the documents are submitted to us for it to be processed. It is true that we have lots of documents that were submitted that we didn't do anything about. And we're trying to change that. We're trying to look at that now to make sure that those applications are processed in a timely manner. But Malika, it's important that for people to know that we have only so many lots available. Part of the challenge, again, we face is that since the 1960s, maybe mid-1970s, new communities have not been developed to make lands available. So a good example is the Suicide Glen Highway. You have 4 settlements on the Suicide Glen Highway: Kurukururu, Yaracabra, Long Creek, and Mobliso. Those communities, when they were developed in the late 60s, you had residential areas, you had agriculture, you had commercial, industrial, and administrative. So the area was laid out really quite beautifully. We have not done that. Since then, no new communities have been laid out. So most of those lands have been issued, a lease is given to somebody. They may not be in occupation of it, but the land is titled. And so we are constantly engaged in a process of repossessing unoccupied lands, but it takes a while. There's a process that you have to go through. And people would go to the highway and say, but I just came from the highway and this particular lot is free. But somebody has a lease for it.
Has a lease, right? They're not doing anything with
They're
it.
not doing
so
anything
you're saying
with
that
it.
once nothing is being done with it, you will
We
move to
we can move the process forward to repossess,
repossess.
but it takes time.
Can that the supposed owners who are not doing anything with it, can they actually challenge the
They
Guyana
can.
Lands and Surveys Commission not to interfere
They,
or intervene?
they have, some of them have been doing that. Well, not successfully, but the fact that you even put up the challenge, it delays the process
Oh.
of canceling. So if a man just want to irritate you or to lengthen the process, to keep you out there, he can do that. He or she can do that. But ultimately, the state will win, I believe. But the fact of the matter is, once the people has a title, there's a process of reclaiming it from them before you
Oh,
can reissue
so
it.
even though they have a title, once they're not utilizing, you can still
There, yes,
repossess.
yes. If
Right.
the lease has certain conditions, one of which is that you must occupy 1/10 of the land within the first year, and thereafter 1/10 until it's fully
until it's fully.
fully occupied. So this is for agriculture purposes, but you expect that it would be beneficially occupied for residential lots within a certain time frame. There should be a building on the lot